and advertisements. She's been teaching Visual Communication 1 and 2, typography, digital media design, and branding packaging in the design program for the last 7 years. And Nooper is on sabbatical right now, so thanks for coming out of your sabbatical.
Thanks for having me. So I know that the show asks us about advice, what I wish I had known then, and actually this design piece answers that, or tries to answer that. So this is a collaborative piece with myself, another designer, Kathy Mueller, the Center for Urban Pedagogy, and Caring Across Generations. And this is facilitated by the Center for Urban Pedagogy in New York, and basically we created a piece for caregiving, adult caregiving specifically. And what happens when all of a sudden overnight you have to provide care for a loved one and you had never done that before. And care, we're talking long-term care. So maybe a loved one had a stroke. Maybe a loved one is now disabled in a way that they're going to need extra help. And what we realized is there's things like Medicare and Medicaid. There's in-home help, out-of-home help, nursing homes. There's a whole system that's really, really, really hard to navigate. And when you come home from the hospital, you just need somebody to tell you where to start. And everyone we talked to in this collaborative project who was faced with being a caregiver, they had to spend years trying to figure out how to navigate a system that honestly is broke, and it's still broke. And so this piece tries to answer that. What could you have used when you first started becoming a caregiver? And so it's just barely scratching the surface, but it's talking about things like, where do you start with Medicare and Medicaid? Where do you start locally to find support? What do you need to potentially self-care when you are a caregiver? And so this is a really, really collaborative project. Myself and the designer worked closely with the Center for Urban Pedagogy, which is in Brooklyn. I encourage you all to look them up because they have a ton of programs for designers and artists and students, and Caring Across Generations, which is also in New York, that works in trying to change public policy about caregiving. And caregiving, can be for young ones and for the whole family, but this one specifically is talking about adult care. This piece specifically is talking about adult caregiving. And I know we have a lot of other folks we need to hear from, so I'll keep this short, but just a little bit about my process. Because this was happening, we were developing this during COVID. One of the things that was important to us is that when we were illustrating this, that the people, you could see their expressions, that the illustrations were somewhat realistic, and not just caricatures. But because we were in lockdown, we couldn't interview people in person. We couldn't send photographers to people's houses to understand what their day-to-days were like. So we actually just had people photograph scenarios on their iPhones. And what was wonderful about that is we got to capture the hard parts, but also the joyful parts of caregiving. And so my process was taking those photos that we got, kind of collaging them together in the environments that I thought would be appropriate for this scenario, and then actually digitizing them and illustrating with them on an iPad. So if you have if you're curious about illustrating on an iPad, I'm always happy to answer some questions or lead you to some of the YouTube videos that I watched when I was trying to learn it. So that's I'll leave it at that. So,
Great.
thanks. Yeah.